Part 96. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 951. Chapter 951 The Final Madness. Colorful snakes were squirming, piled up layer by layer, chasing in their direction. Xiaoling looked down at them, knowing in her heart that they were chasing the scent of blood. As long as the two of them are still injured and dripping with blood, this chase will not stop. What to do? Suddenly, she was so happy that she bit her finger and shook it far away. Her bite was so hard that the blood spilled out in a parabola like broken beads. The snakes suddenly became commotion, and many of them left the tall pile of snakes and chased the direction of the blood. The pile of snakes became much lower. Now, the flying snakes at the top could not touch their feet no matter how much they leaped. Xiaoling felt happy and threw out her blood beads one after another. The two of them climbed up with gritted teeth, and the other guarded against the snakes below. It seemed like hundreds of millions of years had passed before they finally reached the high platform. The moment his feet touched the ground, Li Lei's whole body was exhausted and he couldn't hold on any longer, so he threw himself to the ground. Li Lei, Xiaoling fell to the ground along with him, but regardless of the pain, she sat up and pushed him. Li Lei, how are you? Wake up! Wake up! However, the man's eyes were closed tightly and he still couldn't wake up no matter how she screamed. Xiaoling cried and looked at him. His whole body was soaked with sweat, as if he had been fished out of the lake. His palms had long been torn by the rough steel cables and were bloody. What was even more shocking was that there were several snake bite wounds on his arms and ankles, and the deep blood holes were still gurgling with black blood. Xiaoling was so frightened that she understood how poisonous the snakes raised by Li Feng were. Without any time to think, she bent her head and sucked the venom from Li Lei's wound. After sucking for a long time, she saw that the black blood gradually turned into dark red. And his face was frighteningly livid. Li Lei. Li Lei, she cried, nothing can happen to you, nothing can happen to you. But he didn't realize that a large pool of blood had gathered under his body unknowingly. Here, she was crying miserably, and over there, Xia Moyan, who had finally completed her cover mission, could no longer hold the sniper rifle. She lost too much blood and her face was as white as gold paper, and she fainted on the ground. Beside him, Pei Xian watched him fall to the ground in silence. The tall man stepped over Xia Moyan's body, raised his sniper rifle, and silently aimed at the unconscious person on the platform in the distance. Li Lei, as long as this shot goes down, no one will compete with him for Xiaoling again. Pei Xian looked at the person in the scope, his expression gradually turning cold. Yes, he was terminally ill. Even when he was at his most desperate, he was lucky to have a man like Li Lei staying with Xiaoling. However, seeing her kneeling on the ground, crying bitterly while hugging the man, his heart felt as painful as a knife, and an emotion called jealousy surged up. In his ears, it seemed as if a devil kept saying, Pei Xian, kill him, Xiaoling is yours, so what if you are going to die, in the last days of your life, she can accompany you wholeheartedly, there is no more thunder, no more avoidance of suspicion, you could even get back together, and you could even propose to her. Too big a temptation. Pei Xian tightened his grip on the trigger. However, her tear-stained face was like a brand, burning into his heart. Look, she was crying so sadly. If Li Lei died, would she go with him? Pei Xian is not sure. Perhaps, she will really die for love, right? He looked deeply at her who was crying heartbrokenly. He watched her take out her mobile phone from Li Lei's body and call loudly for help. He also watched her hugging him hurriedly, as if to save him from excessive blood loss. To keep her hypothermic body warm, she tried everything she could think of, so hard, just to save that man. Pei Xian's expression darkened inch by inch, and he put down the gun slumped. A sneer came from the darkness. Pei Xian turned his head suddenly and saw Li Feng lying half dead by the wall, looking at him dying. Li Feng's long, narrow, and beautiful phoenix eyes flashed with a trace of disdain. Pei Xian, among so many people in Baidao, I only admired you. You can see the blood and do evil. But I didn't expect that you would also be like a girl. Grind chirp. Pei Xian raised the of his gun and hit him hard. Li Feng groaned, and the sound of broken ribs was heard. The corners of his lips were stained with blood, but his smile was so weird and beautiful. Ha ha, what kind of hero is he who is cruel to me? He has the ability to be cruel to his love rival. You are really inferior to me in this regard. I can disembowel that woman, but you can't. Well. Pei Xian hit him with the of his gun again. He was condescending and looked coldly at Li Feng on the dirty ground. His voice sounded like it came from the netherworld and purgatory. I can disembowel you. After saying that, he put down the sniper rifle and bent down to pick off the tail from Li Feng's hand. The extremely sharp enamel-carved armor penetrated deeply into his body. With a crash, Li Feng's brocade robe was torn. Pei Xian didn't hold back at all. A long was cut deep from his chest to his abdomen. Blood came out all of a sudden, his skin and flesh rolled up, and a large amount of intestines mixed with unknown organs also flowed out. The fishy smell spread in the cave, making people feel nauseated. Pei Xian remained calm, his face as cold as a god's, as if what he had just cut open was not a person at all, but a lifeless prop. Li Feng groaned in pain and twitched. He was not dead for a while, or even fainted. He looked at Pei Xian, a sly smile appeared on his pale face, and spoke with difficulty, why, are you angry? Ha ha ha, because I touched Ye Xingling? What a pity, she is not your woman. As he spoke, he breathed hard for a long time before continuing, Pei Xian, you and I are both losers, we are all losers in love. Pei Xian's expression moved slightly. He looked at Li Feng and suddenly understood something. If he failed to get Xiaoling and therefore became a loser in love, then the person Li Feng wanted to get was Li Lei. That's why he was so cruel to Xiaoling. In this way, everything makes sense. You are so disgusting, he said coldly to Li Feng, Li Lei will never like you. You're talking nonsense, Li Feng cried weakly like a cat whose tail was stepped on, Xiaolei loves me. The only person Xiaolei loves will always be me. He was just temporarily blinded by that bitch. Ha ha, ha ha, ha 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 ha. His expression was distorted, his eyes looked into the distant void, sometimes he gritted his teeth, and sometimes he laughed crazily. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 952. Chapter 952 Surgery. Crazy, this person is a madman through and through. Pei Xian, who prides himself on being aloof and unscrupulous in his work, felt strange and disgusting after seeing Li Feng's madness. He was still looking down at Li Feng. In the dim light, Li Feng's intestines flowed all over the floor, and his laughter gradually weakened. Although he was still breathing, he could no longer say anything. Pei Xian coughed a few times, bent down and dragged him outside. He would not let Li Feng die so easily. It was too cheap to disembowel this pervert who tried to murder Xiaoling. He ignored his weak body. The waves of cancer pain coming from inside his body made him almost unable to stand. He dragged Li Feng down the cave little by little. His red brocade robe was broken, and his intestines and blood flowed all over the floor. He dragged and panted. This time, knowing that something happened to Xiaoling and that he was about to be pushed into the operating room in a few minutes, he followed him regardless of everyone's objections. He was willing to use his own life to protect the safety of his beloved girl. But how could Li Feng, a pervert, dare to be so cruel to the girl he regards as his treasure? Pei Xian's figure was shaky due to the pain, but his eyes were gloomy and cold. He dragged Li Feng to the bottom of the cave, about 10 meters away from the snake pit. He stumbled and fell to the ground. He had exhausted all his strength and could not drag the person into the snake pit. He stared at Li Feng, his eyes full of unwillingness, and let this pervert disembowel himself and die. No. It's too cheap for him. But, so what if you are unwilling? The fighting outside was still going on. In the huge cave, except for him, there were only Li Lei, who was unconscious on the platform in the distance, and Xiaoling, who was crying so hard that no one could help him drag Li Feng to feed the snakes. Seeing that Li Feng was about to bleed to death, Pei Xian clenched his fists bitterly. Li Feng looked at him weakly. Although he was speechless, his eyes were full of mockery. He understood Pei Xian's intention. The man wanted him to die as miserable as possible. Unfortunately, he could no longer do what he wanted. Although Li Feng was very dissatisfied with the way he died, he couldn't help but laugh happily when he thought that Pei Xian was also dissatisfied. Just then, a leopard with colorful fur rushed into the cave. It was covered in blood, and its amber eyes spotted Pei Xian and Li Feng in just a split second. It roared and rushed towards the two of them. Pei Xian recognized that this was Li Lei's leopard, Er Mao. He didn't know what Er Mao wanted to do and whether it would hurt him. However, he was exhausted and still fighting the severe pain of cancer. Unable to move his body, not even an inch. Er Mao rushed in front of them and stopped. It didn't look at Pei Xian at all. The fierce light in its amber inorganic eyes only stared at one person, or to be precise, most of the disemboweled and inhuman figure. It roared angrily and bit Li Feng. His arm, in an instant, a section of his forearm was torn off alive from his body. Even though Li Feng was already dying, he couldn't help but scream in pain. Er Mao was not satisfied. He threw away his forearm, licked his mouth covered with blood, stared at Li Feng and roared dangerously. Er Mao, right, Pei Xian coughed, with a painful look on his face, and spoke weakly, if you can understand what I say, drag him to the snake pit over there. He reluctantly raised his hand and pointed at 10 a few meters away. There was a huge snake pit that smelled fishy. He has discovered that Er Mao is not here to deal with him at all. But he came to take revenge from Li Feng. Hearing this, the human-like leopard lowered its head and caught Li Feng in its mouth. Its sharp white teeth sank deeply into the flesh of Li Feng's waist and abdomen, but it restrained itself from biting him into two pieces. It dragged the fierce wind, regardless of the blood and intestines flowing everywhere. From time to time, intestines were involved in stones on the ground, entangled, and torn alive. Li Feng rolled his eyes as he was pulled hard, spitting out blood one after another. Finally, with great difficulty, Er Mao dragged him to the edge of the snake pit. Er Mao then let go of him, roared angrily, lowered his head and bit off half of his body. Li Feng couldn't even scream this time. He watched his upper body and legs separated. He fell headfirst into the snake pit with his shoulders and ribs mixed with blood and intestines. He fell into the snake pit in an instant. Countless venomous snakes surrounded him, and these former pets ate him up, leaving only half of his bones. Er Mao was satisfied. The leopard with its soft fur raised its head, looked around, and soon found Li Lei on the platform over there, trotting along the short bridge towards Li Lei and Xiaoling. The group of snakes surrounded Li Feng's white frame reluctantly, and before they came to their senses, Er Mao had already run to his owner's side. It looked down at its livid and unconscious master, let out a thin whimper, and rubbed its huge head against Li Lei's body. Er Mao! Xiaoling cried, what should I do? Help me, Li Lei will be fine, right? Your master will be fine. Her tears fell on Er Mao's fur drop by drop. Er Mao stretched out his tongue gently, licked his master, and then licked her hand. It squeezed its huge body next to its owner to keep him warm after losing too much blood, and also allowed Xiaoling's nervous and stiff body to relax a little. Li Lei, you can't die. She murmured to him, regardless of whether he could hear it or not. You promised me that we would grow old together, and we would go to our new home together, watch the sunrise and sunset together, and have a life together. A lot of children, Lile, you haven't seen our second baby born yet. As she spoke, she put a hand on her lower abdomen. She seemed to feel no pain there, but that feeling of emptiness gave her an ominous premonition. Finally, when the rescuers arrived, when the warriors who were covered in blood and scarred like Mao rushed to her and said something loudly to her, she couldn't hear clearly. Actually, like Lile, she had already lost too much blood. The wound that Li Feng inflicted on her didn't seem to be deep, but it had long since struggled and cracked during the violent activities, especially the hole on her lower abdomen, which had shed an unknown amount of blood. If she hadn't been protecting Lile, she would have fainted long ago by relying on a hazy consciousness to support herself. Rescue workers rushed them to the hospital. In the hazy state, she saw stretchers, ambulances, doctors, and nurses, Mr. Li, Sutang, and her mother's worried and concerned face. She was then pushed into the operating room and given anesthesia. "What are you going to do?" Her voice was weak, and she struggled uneasily, trying to get off the operating table. I'm fine, why do you need to operate on me?" The doctor looked at her with compassion. "Mrs. Li, you have had a miscarriage. You must have an operation immediately, otherwise your life will be in danger." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weiniang. Chapter 953. Chapter 953. Brother, you are so handsome. What, a miscarriage? She looked at the doctor in disbelief, her eyes widened, as if what the doctor said had become an incomprehensible language, without any sense of reality. Her dry petal-like lips moved slightly, wanting to say something. However, the anesthetic needle gradually took effect, and soon she fell into darkness. When I woke up, I saw the pale white ceiling of the ward and the glass hanging bottle. Mrs. Xia held her hand and sat beside the hospital bed, with a faint dark cyan shadow under her eyes. Xiaoling called out, "Mom." Her voice was hoarse and so weak that it was almost inaudible. Mrs. Xia heard it and raised her eyes to see that she was awake. She smiled tiredly but happily. "Xiaoling, are you awake? It's great that you are okay. I'll call the doctor to check you out." As she spoke, she reached out to ring the emergency bell on the bedside. Xiaoling gently held her hand. Where is Lile? She knew Lile better than anyone else. If he was fine, he would stay by her bedside. But now, he is nowhere to be seen. He must be injured. It's not easy. However, how much she hoped that she had guessed wrong, there was a hint of secret hope in her eyes when she looked at her mother. He is also recuperating in the hospital bed, and he will probably wake up in a few days. She breathed a sigh of relief at first. Great, he is not dead. Suddenly, his heart started to rise again. He hadn't woken up from the coma yet. She looked at her mother and said, "I want to see him." Xia stopped her. "Your body is still very weak. The doctor told you not to go to the ground casually. What if you can't conceive a child after the disease is caused?" Hearing this, Xiaoling fell silent. "Until now, I felt empty in my body. I couldn't help but feel sad when I remembered that my daughter, who was only 3 or 4 months pregnant, was gone. It was because she was not careful. When she came out of Pei Xian's ward, she should have stood there waiting for Lile, or something, she didn't know." She gently let go of her mother's hand and covered it on her soft belly, stunned. The ground shed tears. Xia also shed tears sadly. "You are still young, take good care of yourself, and you will have children in the future. Xiaoling didn't want her mother to be there to grieve with her, so she finally stopped her tears and changed the subject. Where's my brother? At that time, she was hung on a steel rope by Li Feng, and she heard that her brother was also here. Mrs. Ya thought of her son and looked gloomy. Your brother was injured by that beast Li Feng, and he also lay in the hospital for a few days, but he is fine now. The doctor said that he will be able to fully recover in a few days. By the way, his ward is next to yours. I asked him to come over and see you. Xiaoling was a little surprised. Isn't this the obstetrics and gynecology department? The inpatient departments of general hospitals are divided by departments. For example, if she had an abortion, she must be recuperating in the inpatient department of the obstetrics and gynecology department. Where is Xiaomoyan? No matter what kind of injury he had, it couldn't be from obstetrics and gynecology. Mrs. Ya smiled. Silly boy, you are in the VIP ward on the top floor of the inpatient department. This floor is quiet. You live alone. In addition, your brother is thinking about you and asked to be transferred here to recuperate. Who wouldn't give him 3 cents of noodles? Rich people naturally have privileges, let alone a big shot like Xiaomoyan. Hearing this, Xiaoling nodded. Mrs. Ya stood up and was about to call her son. Suddenly, she heard Xiaoling ask, what about Li Lei's ward? Mrs. Ya paused slightly, turned around, and waved her fringed shawl. He is in the ward in the building next door. He is accompanied by the Li family. Everything is fine, don't worry. Xiaoling frowned, always feeling that something was wrong. However, after thinking for a long time, he still had no idea. Xiaomoyan had already walked in wearing a hospital gown. It's rare to see him like this. He is no longer dressed in white. The blue and white stripes are worn casually on his body. The 2 top slits are undone, revealing a bit of collarbone. As a biological sister, Xiaoling is also a little surprised. Why didn't she realize before that her brother was so good-looking and so provoking? It was obviously a loose hospital gown, but he had to wear it with a seductive effect, with a little bit of laziness and abstinence, which made people. Well, let people. Xiaoling touched her eyes and covered her eyes with her paws. Brother, you are so handsome. He was so handsome that she couldn't stand it anymore. Xiaomoyan didn't expect that her first words would be this. There was a smile in his cold eyes, and he deliberately teased her, am I better looking, or is that one from your family better looking? Li Lei is the most handsome, classmate Xiaoling betrayed without hesitation. This floor was very quiet back then, but as soon as I moved in, the floor was almost trampled by the little nurses asking for help. The little nurses don't care whether they are national preceptors or not. Given their class, they don't understand what this title means at all. They only know that there is a handsome guy in the VIP ward on the top floor. He is very handsome, rich and handsome, and has a perfect figure. In the past few days, almost all the nurses in the hospital have come to check wards, find doctors, and take turns. Xiaomoyan was watched all over for reasons such as delivering lunch, passing by, etc. The few nurses in charge of his bed went so far that they almost started fighting every day to compete for the spot to change his dressing. The girls who won the fight were so excited that they took advantage of the opportunity to change his dressing and openly looked at his body and ate his tofu. Xiaomoyan was so disturbed that he almost went crazy. Therefore, he could only endure it. Because this is the only fun my mother has when she is worried about her sister every night. Xiaomoyan walked to her sister's bedside, bent down and looked at her. Wake up. When you wake up, come back to the tribe with me to recuperate and go through the discharge procedures. Xiaoling blinked her eyes, a little confused. Why are you so anxious? Li Lei hasn't woken up yet. Xiaomoyan's face was full of black lines. I will not stay here and be harassed by those little nurses. Moreover, the air in the tribe is good, and the food and water quality are better than here. which is very beneficial to your recovery. Xiaoling shook her head firmly. Then you go back first. I won't, I have to wait for Lilei. As she spoke, she looked her brother up and down. Mom said you were injured by the strong wind. Where was the injury? Is it serious? You look almost healed already. Xiaomoyan gritted his teeth secretly. Did this sister finally remember to care about him? End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 954. Chapter 954. Which ward is he in? Actually, it's no wonder Xiaoling. She had experienced too many things during this period. Pei Xian was terminally ill, he was kidnapped by Li Feng, Lilei was seriously injured and unconscious, and the child had a miscarriage. When she saw Xiaomoyan walking into the ward with her hair and tail intact, I was really relieved. Being alive and having arms and legs was just a small matter, which was equivalent to, well, nothing happened. Xiaomoyan also understood her thoughts and slowed down his voice. When I was shooting to cover Lilei, Li Feng suddenly appeared from behind and attacked me. Fortunately, Pei Xian appeared in time to stop him, and I only suffered a small injury. The wound has healed. He didn't tell her that it was a nearly fatal gunshot wound. Xiaoling saw that he looked just like an ordinary person, so she believed him. But, Pei Xian also went? She asked her doubts. Why didn't I see Pei Xian? Is he okay? The last words were spoken in a slightly trembling voice. She was really afraid that her brother would tell her that something had happened to Pei Xian. People suffering from cancer spend every day of their lives snatching time from the hands of death. For ordinary people, just a few days can for them. It may be that yin and yang are separated forever. She became frightened and clenched her hands into fists. Xiaomoyan's voice became gentler. He postponed the operation and went to save you while he was sick. When he came back, he had a high fever and was unconscious for 3 days and 3 nights. But don't worry, the person has been rescued now, and the original cancer lesions it has actually shrunk a lot, and is now in stable condition and undergoing further treatment. She breathed a sigh of relief. It's great that Pei Xian is fine. He's so stupid, she murmured, he's so sick and yet he still runs to save me. Xiaomoyan said, Li Feng was killed by him and Mao. As he spoke, he told her roughly the circumstances of Li Feng's death. After listening to this, Xiaoling was lost in thought for a long time. I didn't expect that such a weird and creepy pervert would end up like this. She still doesn't understand why Li Feng is targeting Lilei so much. How would Lilei feel if he woke up and found that Li Feng was dead? Does he have any last words? Xiaoling asked. Xiaomoyan shook his head. Probably only Pei Xian knows. When Li Feng was talking to Pei Xian, Xiaomoyan had already passed out, and he only heard what happened next. Xiaoling stopped thinking about it. In fact, she had so many things to worry about that she couldn't even take care of them. She turned the topic back to Lilei worriedly. I still want to see him. If he doesn't wake up for a day, I won't be able to let go. She raised her head and looked at her mother and brother pleadingly. Mrs. Xia frowned. You kid, why don't you know how to take care of your own body? Xiaomoyan didn't look happy either. What do you think? If it weren't for the Li family, how could you have suffered so much? Follow me back to the clan. It's important to take good care of yourself. Xiaoling shook her head stubbornly. I want to see him. Mrs. Xia used a delaying tactic. If you really want to see him, Mom won't stop you, but you have to wait until you can get out of bed and walk. You take good care of your injuries. When your condition gets better in a few days, Mom will go with you to see him. Xiaoling wanted to go to Lilei immediately, but she also understood that what her mother said made sense. She could only stay in the ward obediently, take good care of her health, and try to be able to walk around one day earlier and visit Lilei earlier. Her original mobile phone disappeared when Li Feng took her hostage. She asked her mother for a new mobile phone to pass the boring time of recuperation. Friends called and sent WeChat messages one after another to express their condolences. Xiaoling still felt lonely. The person I love the most is currently unable to contact her. She looked at Li Lei's handsome profile picture in WeChat, thought for a while, and recorded a voice message to him, "I'm awake and I'm fine. Li Lei, you should be well too. Wake up early. Come on." The send key was pressed. That afternoon, the nurse pushed open the door and came in to change her sling bottle. The thick wooden door was not closed properly and was ajar. A burst of noise suddenly came from outside the door. "The daughter of your Xia family is a human being, but the grandson of my Li family is not a human being? Your Majesty, Mrs. Xia, why do you stop me and don't let me in? I want to see my granddaughter-in-law. Don't bully me too much." Xiaoling recognized Mr. Li's voice and asked the nurse, "What's going on outside?" The little nurse looked a little uncomfortable and said hesitantly, I'll go out and take a look." With that said, he changed the sling bottle for her and ran out, closing the door behind her. Xiaoling waited on the hospital bed for several minutes, but the nurse didn't come back. The sound outside was also blocked by the heavy wooden door, so she couldn't hear anything. Inexplicably, a wave of irritation arose in her heart. At this time, her cell phone rang, and she subconsciously pressed the button. "Yeah, Mom and your brother are standing outside. Do you think you are a relative? If something happens to my grandson, I won't let you go." The old man was obviously confused and almost yelled at her. Xiaoling felt as if her heartbeat was about to stop. What? Li Lei is not out of danger yet. Neither her mother nor her brother told her. They only said in an understatement that his condition is stable and he will wake up soon. She didn't even know that it was such a serious situation. "Which ward is he in?" "I'll come right over," Xiaoling said as she struggled to get up from the hospital bed. With just one simple movement, she was already sweating from exhaustion. Mr. Li snorted coldly and gave her a ward number. These days, Li Lei has been living in the intensive care unit for rescue, so even if patients like Xia Moyan can move to the next door to her ward, Li Lei will never be able to move. The hospital had already issued 2 critical illness notices to Li Lei. Mr. Li and Su Tang were waiting outside day and night. Even Xiao Xiaohuo's eyes were red from crying several times, but what about Xiaoling? This granddaughter-in-law has never been seen. Mr. Li has already tried to contact Xiaoling. However, at first Xiaoling was in a coma due to surgery, and later, the Xia family blocked the entire VIP ward area to prevent anyone from disturbing her. If she hadn't sent a WeChat message to Li Lei's cell phone herself, the old man would still not be able to contact her. As soon as he received her WeChat message, he came to her angrily, but was still stopped. There was no other way. Mr. Li, who originally wanted to scold her in person, had no choice but to call her. Xiaoling didn't know about the twists and turns, but she roughly guessed that her mother and others deliberately concealed Li Lei's illness in order to allow her to recover from her injuries. She was so anxious that she put down the phone and wanted to go to the ground. However, she had just had an abortion and was still very weak. As soon as her feet touched the ground, her body went limp and she fell. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 955. Chapter 955, Not Out of Danger Yet. The infusion bottle holder was moved and hit her hard, with glass shards shattering all over the floor. "Xiaoling, this is what Mrs. Xia saw when she came in." Xiaoling ignored the pain on her body and stared at her angrily and aggrievedly. "Mom. You deliberately hid Li Lei's situation from me, right? I want to see Li Lei. Let me go see him." She struggled to stand up, but her bare feet stepped on the broken glass, and blood flowed out. Mrs. Xia felt extremely distressed and hurriedly stepped forward to help her up. Seeing that the matter could no longer be concealed and she could not persuade Xiaoling, she said, "Don't worry, I'll ask the nurse to find a wheelchair to push you there." "That old man Li Shanhe, there are so many things going on, what's the point of going? You're not a doctor." "I just want to go see him." Xiaoling's eyes were red. "If something happens to him, I won't be able to survive." "Why are you dead and alive?" Mrs. Xia frowned, helped her sit up on the bed, called a nurse to pick out the glass shards on her feet, and then called a nurse to help her into a wheelchair and covered her with a soft blanket. Plus Xia Moyan and the bodyguards, the group went to the critical ward in the inpatient building next door. Many people from the Li family were guarding outside. Mr. Li, several subordinates, bodyguard, and life assistant Arnold held Xiaowei in his arms. The little child was probably very tired and was sleeping with his eyes closed. Next to Mr. Li, Sutang was persuading him softly, "Old man, even if Yexin Ling is ignorant, you should take care of yourself and don't get angry. Now that something has happened to Li Lei, the whole family is counting on you. Today, she is wearing a lavender thin woolen cardigan, a little makeup, and her hair is tied into a simple bun. She looks sensible and homely, and she looks like a good wife and mother." Mr. Li sighed deeply and looked at her, thinking to himself, why can't his grandson look down on such a good girl like Sutang? He just married that vixen Yexin Ling. It's so difficult to tell whether his life or death is uncertain, and you still don't even come to see him at this time. The old man said, "That woman is not here, you have been tired these days." These days, Sutang has been guarding outside Li Lei's ward, and the old man has seen it. Sutang lowered his head slightly, hiding the joy in his eyes well. Oh, the reason why she stayed here without leaving her side was not only because she was worried about Li Lei, but also because she was just trying to show off to the old man. Comparing it to Yexin Ling, who has never appeared before, it's not clear who is more suitable to be the wife of the Li family. She said softly to the old man, "This is all Sutang's duty, there is nothing to worry about." "Oh, my duty." Xiaoling was still sitting in a wheelchair. She was pushed over and saw Sutang. She felt as if a thorn had been stabbed in her heart. When she heard such words again, she was so angry that she felt deep in her lower abdomen. The wound there started to hurt again. "Sutang, since when did it become your duty to take care of my husband?" What she said was so unpleasant that Sutang couldn't help but change his face slightly, looking embarrassed. Everyone turned their heads and saw a large group of Xia family members. Madame Arnold was the first to break the silence and said happily, "You are here. Are you feeling better?" He is Li Lei's personal bodyguard and special life assistant. He has also been familiar with Xiaoling for a long time. As a member of her own family, she was qualified to ask her questions in front of so many people. Xiaoling glanced at the little Xiaowei he was holding in his arms and said, "I'm fine." "How is Li Lei?" She was very satisfied with Arnold's behavior. At least, he didn't mess with her while she was recovering from illness. Xiao Xiaowei was handed over to others. Arnold's face was a little embarrassed, the situation of the young master. Humbling and unable to speak any further, he glanced at Mr. Li for help. Mr. Li snorted coldly. In front of the Xia family, he did not say anything unpleasant to Xiaoling. He only said, "Since you are here, let's go see Xiaolei. His vital signs have been very unstable. Until now, you are not out of danger. Since you are in love, maybe letting him hear your voice will help you get better." Xiaoling nodded and called the nurse, saying that she was going to the intensive care unit. The nurse said, "Mrs. Li, in order to prevent infection, our intensive care unit is isolated. Please follow me and put on a sterilized isolation gown before going in." She glanced at the nurse and said, "You also need to change." Xiaoling said, "I can go in alone. I can turn the wheelchair by myself. Since we want to prevent infection, it would be better for Li Lei if one less person goes in." The nurse nodded, helped her change into an isolation gown alone, and watched her enter the ward. Sutang watched from the outside, with a fire of jealousy burning in his heart, trying to prevent infection, but also to prevent infection. These days, except for Mr. Li and Xiao Shaowai, who went in to visit Li Lei once, everyone else has been blocked from the door. Even Sutang, who has been waiting in the corridor every night, has never received a visit. Entry permit. But what about Xiaoling? After not showing up for so many days in a row, I was granted admission as soon as I showed up. Sutang clenched his fingers into a fist at his side, his eyes darkening. However, she could only endure this tone. Who told her that she was not the principal wife and had no status? What qualifications do you have to appear next to him? Over there, Xiaoling struggled to turn her wheelchair inside. The isolation door closed behind her. The room was extremely quiet, except for the sound of medical equipment. She saw a man lying on a hospital bed in the center of the room. His body was covered with various tubes and his eyes were closed. His chest didn't rise and fall, and if it weren't for the electrocardiogram machine nearby, she wouldn't even be sure he was still alive. Li Lei, she murmured, desperately turning the wheelchair to his bedside. He lowered his head and looked at the face that was full of thoughts. Li Lei, wake up. She was extremely sad. Why are you so stupid? You know that Li Feng is a madman, but you still go to save me regardless of your life. If you die, how can I survive alone? Tears fell from her cheeks. She stared at him for a long time and said many, many words. However, it was as if he didn't hear anything and didn't react at all. Her heart kept sinking, and a feeling of panic came over her. What if he really never woke up again, or even died? No. She doesn't want him to die. Li Lei, wake up, she cried hoarsely, you promised me you would be happy. I don't know how long it took, but the nurse's voice came from the temporary earphones given to her. Mrs. Li, the visiting time is up. For the safety of the patient, please come out as soon as possible to prevent infection. No matter how much she was reluctant to leave, Xiaoling could only look at him deeply, turned her wheelchair with difficulty, and left the ward. In the corridor, there was still a group of people waiting. How is it? The most anxious person was Mr. Li, who asked her, is Xiao Li's condition okay? Does he react when you talk to him? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 956. Chapter 956, Adventurous Methods. Xiaoling shook her head in despair and was speechless. The dim light in the corridor made her look haggard, as if all her life force had been drained away, leaving only an empty body. She didn't want to talk to anyone, and she didn't want to make any expression. What repeatedly appeared in front of her eyes was the scene when he told her to hug her tightly when surrounded by snakes. At that time, his voice was so steady and powerful, and his back was as solid as a mountain. People can rely on with confidence. But what about now? When he needed support and reliance, she could do nothing. In my ear, a woman was saying, why can't you wake him up? Don't you love him the most? Or maybe he doesn't love you enough at all, so he doesn't respond to your voice. She didn't know whose voice it was, and was still immersed in her own world. Xia Moyan, who was beside the wheelchair, raised his eyes and glanced at Sutang lightly. Although he didn't know her, it didn't stop him from seeing through the hostility hidden deep in her eyes at first glance, as well as the unconcealable jealousy. He asked Mr. Li in a clear voice, can any idle person come into a place like this? Mr. Li was startled for a moment, then realized that he was talking about Sutang, and quickly smoothed things over. Ah Tang, that's not what she meant. She was too anxious, so. Arnold Xiaomoyan didn't listen to his explanation at all. He called over to the silent bodyguard who was holding Xiao Shaowai and said, "Please leave the irrelevant people." "Yes," Arnold responded, handed Xiao Shaowai into the hands of Mrs. Xia, and said to Su Tang, "Miss Su, please leave here." Although he was the bodyguard of the Li family, he was directly under Li Lei's orders. Seeing the current situation clearly, helping this brother-in-law is helping one's own people, but what about Su Tang? He is just a subordinate and an outsider. Su Tang's eyes widened slightly. Could it be the other way around? People from the Li family actually helped outsiders deal with her. "Arnold, you," Su Tang was surprised and ashamed, and even his voice changed slightly, "don't forget whose family you are from." Arno said politely but forcefully, "Miss Su, don't force me to be violent. It's the opposite, it's really the opposite." Su Tang bit her lip and glanced at Mr. Li for help. This was the first time she had been ordered to be kicked out in public, or in front of her love rival. Where would she put her face when word spread? However, Mr. Li sighed slightly and said, "Ah Tang, you are tired from being here these days. Go down and have a good rest and recuperate. The old man is old, but he still has this bit of vision." The imperial master was obviously very displeased, and he did not want to hit the muzzle at this time. What's more, Li Lei had already taken away his power. Even if he wanted to order Arnold, there was no way he would listen. The only thing he could do was to smooth things over for Su Tang. He could barely give her a step down by saying something nice about the situation. Su Tang felt a little cold in his heart. At the critical moment, the old man really didn't have her in his heart. This old man has always put the interests of the family first, but now she is so isolated and helpless in the Li family. "Miss Su, it's time to go," Arnold urged her again, reached out to grab her arm, and said matter-of-factly, "I'm sorry." Then he walked out of the corridor. Su Tang was pulled by him and staggered, and said angrily, "Let me go, I will walk by myself." With a pale face and biting his lip, he left everyone's sight. The atmosphere was a little awkward for a while. Xiaomoyan saw that his sister was in bad condition and said to the nurse, "Push her back to the ward." The nurse responded and pushed Xiaoling's wheelchair to go out. However, Xiaoling held down the wheelchair as if she suddenly woke up. "No, I won't leave. I want to stay here with Li Lei," she said. Raised his head and looked at Xiaomoyan with hopeful eyes. "Brother, save Li Lei, is there anything you can do to save him?" Xiaomoyan's eyebrows remained unchanged. "It's too late, I can't do anything." Xiaoling shook her head in disbelief. "How come you can't help it? Brother, don't lie to me, you will definitely find a way, right?" She raised her head, trying to see any clues in Xiaomoyan's eyes. But all she got in response was silence. The light in her eyes dimmed little by little. Mr. Li had been rejected by Xiaomoyan a few days ago. He was not surprised at this time, but felt miserable in his heart. "My poor grandson." While muttering, he could no longer stand and trembled. He fell down on the bench on the side of the corridor. Xiaoling lowered her head and waited with him. Her eyelashes were lowered, her eyes were dark, and she didn't know what she was thinking. Mrs. Xia felt sorry for her body and said, "Go back, Xiaoling. You have been guarding him for so long. You must take care of yourself. Your health is not good yet." Xiaoling raised her head and gave her a forced smile. "Mom, I'm fine. You and your brother should go back first. I'll stay with him for another hour and then let the nurse push me back to the ward." Seeing her loose tone, Mrs. Xia understood that she would not listen no matter how hard she tried to persuade her, so she could only sigh and said, "Let me stay here with you." Xiaoling shook her head. "It's really okay. You and your brother should go away. I want to be quiet. By the way, take Xiao Hui away too. What should I do if he can't sleep well here and gets sick? It doesn't matter to me. I have Arnold. I'm accompanying you." Mrs. She looked at the sleeping Xiao Hui again, feeling sorry for her grandson after all. She took the child from Arnold's hand, gave Xiaoling a few words, and left with her son. In the corridor, only Xiaoling, Mr. Li, and Arnold were left. Xiaoling whispered to Mr. Li, "Grandpa, I want to ask you something." The old man raised his eyebrows and looked at her, but said nothing. He disliked this grandson's wife very much. If it weren't for her, how could his grandson get into trouble one after another? Xiaoling didn't care about his attitude and kept talking, "Please help me leave the hospital. I'm going to find Wei Lingnan. At this point, maybe he is the only one who can save Li Lei." There was a slight crack in Mr. Li's expression. What can he do that even the national preceptor can't do? "I have to give it a try," Xiaoling said. She heard her brother talk about Wei Lingnan's background and understood that this mysterious man was the only one on earth who could fight against the Xia family. Since he had such great energy and ran a biopharmaceutical group, he might actually be able to save Li Lei. No matter how bad it is, it's like treating a dead horse like a living horse. Mr. Li's thoughts are also vivid. After all, he is his grandson, so he will try even if there is a glimmer of hope. He stood up and directed Arnold, "Push Yexing Ling to follow me. Be careful on the way so that no one sees any flaws." Arnold's expression was not very good. "Master, madam. This is too risky." "Madam, your body is so weak, what should you do if something happens?" End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 957. Chapter 957. The Person You Must Meet. Xiaoling glared at him, "Do you have the final say or do I?" Arnold was about to cry. This is not a matter of who has the final say, but whether she can be so strong. The young master has long told him to take good care of his wife and put her first in everything. Even the young master's own affairs can be put aside. If the young master wakes up and finds that something has happened to his wife, even if he has 10 lives, it will not be enough for the young master to kill her. Mr. Li also frowned. "What are you talking about? Let's go." Arno didn't listen to Mr. Li at all. He was Li Lei's confidant, but not the old man's confidant. His eyes were only looking at Xiaoling, eagerly hoping that she would change her mind. Xiaoling usually looks stupid and easy to bully, but at this time she was not stupid at all. She still glared at him. "You won't push me, right? At worst, I won't need a wheelchair and can walk by myself." After saying that, she stood up unsteadily. "Come on, hold on to the wall of the corridor and walk forward. After taking only a few steps, you stumble and almost fall." Arnold was so frightened that he quickly stretched out his hand to support her. Madam, please don't embarrass me. Can't you do it if I push you?" This 1.8-meter tall man was really about to cry. Seeing that the lady has become determined after eating the weight, it would be better to accompany her there, so that she can be taken care of at least. Xiaoling sat back in the wheelchair with satisfaction. Her heartbeat was short of breath, and there was sweat on her forehead. Mr. Li was leading the way. Although he was older, the experience he accumulated when he entered the world was still there. When the Xia family was unprepared, he easily found his way out of the hospital area, contacted the driver of the Li family, and drove. Xiaoling went to the group headquarters where the Wei family was located. It was an inconspicuous building, even a little dilapidated. It looks like there are as many small and medium-sized companies in the city as Zhang's hiking. If Xiaoling hadn't come here once before to deal with Pei Xian's illness, I wouldn't believe it. This is the only company in the world that can compete with the Xia family monster's lair. The virus released from here can destroy the whole world. She was pushed by Arnold and entered the door, with Mr. Li following her. The lady at the front desk was polite. "Good afternoon, who are you looking for?" Wei Lingnan. Xiaoling reported the name. The face of the lady at the front desk changed slightly. There were many people here, but not many wanted to see their top boss, the mysterious general guard. She couldn't help but look at Xiaoling a few more times and asked, "Do you have an appointment?" Xiaoling was a little anxious. "No, tell him that Yexin Ling is here." The front desk lady obviously doesn't pay much attention to entertainment news. After hearing her introduce herself, I suddenly remembered where this familiar face came from. Yexin Ling. The super queen at the height of her power. Oh my god, big stars, real people. Ling, Miss Ling, is it really you? It's such an honor to meet you. The lady at the front desk became excited instantly and looked at her heartily. Can you sign your name for me? Although she is not a star chaser, many of her friends are star chasers. Getting Yezingling's autograph is such an honorable thing. It can be shown off in the circle of friends for a long time. Xiaoling felt even more anxious. If in normal times, she could still pay attention to her image and deal with these ordinary people, but now it was a critical moment for Li Lei's life and death. How could she be in the mood to sign anything? Please help me contact Wei Lingnan as soon as possible. Her anger could no longer be suppressed. However, the front desk lady said in embarrassment, if you don't make an appointment, you can't see Mr. Wei, even if you are a super diva. Just kidding, it is said that our boss is very scary, and anyone who offends him will not end well. She would rather endure the pain and offend a big star than offend him. Xiaoling's expression turned cold this time. You are new here, right? Huh, the lady at the front desk was a little stunned. How did she know? Then I heard Xiaoling say in a cold voice, the receptionist who stopped me from seeing Wei Lingnan has disappeared. The front desk lady shuddered. She had indeed just entered this company not long ago. She vaguely heard that her predecessor had offended someone. She didn't know where Mr. Wei had taken it. Now it seems that the person he offended was this woman in front of me. Wait a moment, I'll ask you for permission, she stuttered. Xiaoling could only wait patiently for her instructions. The front desk lady was not high enough, so she had to transfer several calls before getting a reply. After hanging up, she said apologetically to Xiaoling, I'm sorry, Miss Ling, Mr. Wei is busy, and I won't see anyone during this period, including you. What is Wei Lingnan busy with during this time? Xiaoling's heart sank to the bottom. The last time she came, Wei Lingnan somehow took the time to have a quick meeting with her. Even if he didn't agree to treat Pei Xian, he wouldn't reject her thousands of miles away. This time it was what's wrong? She glanced at the front desk lady and realized that this little girl didn't have enough authority. She couldn't find out the reason no matter how hard she asked, so she had to call Wei Shayin. I'm at the headquarters of your group and I want to see your uncle. What can you do? Wei Shayin was startled. Are you crazy? You want to see that pervert? He doesn't know how to eat people, Xiaoling said impatiently. He will. Wei Shayin would have gone crazy if she wasn't crazy. Just stay where you are and don't move. I'll be here right away. Half an hour later, a disheveled Wei Shayin appeared at the front desk of the group. Her plain white well-made shirt was all buttoned incorrectly. She exuded a faint fragrance of shower gel, and her hair was stained with some foam. It looked like she had been washed in the shower. He rushed out halfway. Xiaoling looked at him blankly. Do you want to work so hard? Just then, Wei Shayin roared at her, what are you doing here? Don't you know that my little uncle is a pervert? 10 of you, no, 100 of you are not enough for him. Xiaoling raised her face in the wheelchair and looked at him steadily. I know all what you said, but Li Lei is not out of danger yet, and your uncle may be the only one who can save him. Wei Xiao's voice fell silent. He has also been watching the news recently and knows about Li Lei's accident and how important Li Lei is to her. Looking at her haggard expression, he walked a few steps in the hall irritably, and finally made up his mind. Let's go, I will take you to block him. He understood her temperament, that she would not give up until Huang He, and she usually seemed very easy to deceive. But if you really encounter something you care about, even 10 cows can't pull it back. Wei Shayin had the same idea as Arnold. Instead of letting her run wild and cause trouble, it would be safer to help her. Xiaoling smiled, "Thank you, Wei." Wei Shayin glared at her, "Don't thank me. I think it's stupid to bring you in." Xiaoling still smiled, but she was very grateful in her heart. Since she met this friend, he has really helped her a lot. Wei Shayin looked at her wheelchair with disgust and said, "My little uncle is afraid of making noise, so your bodyguard and old man should not go in and make him unhappy. I will push you in myself." End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 958. Chapter 958, Going Deep into the Wei Family Base. Xiaoling nodded and said yes. Wei Shayin looked around the wheelchair for a long time, stretched out his hand and pulled it back, and finally asked with a troubled face, "How long has it been since this wheelchair was disinfected?" He disliked things coming out of the hospital. Xiaoling almost forgot that this person is a misophobia. However, she was in no mood to argue with him, so she scolded him, "Push me away quickly." Wei Shayin still hesitated, turned to the front desk and asked, "Do we have a wheelchair in the library? Bring a new one." The girl at the front desk knew that he was the young master of the Wei family, so she answered respectfully, "There are no more in the library, but 2 new ones have been brought into the laboratory in Area G. Can I help you transfer one?" Forget it. Wei Shayin was even more disgusted. G area laboratory? If the virus over there leaks out, it will most likely destroy the Earth. He would rather have a worn-out wheelchair that has been rolled in the mud 100 times in an ordinary hospital than a brand new one in Area G. He asked the front desk for 2 tissues, carefully wrapped his hands, then held the handle of the wheelchair with a particularly aggrieved and surrendered expression, and pushed Xiaoling deep into the building. Although this building looks ordinary, in fact, the surface structure is just an illusion to fool ordinary people. The really powerful bases of the Wei family are all built deep underground. Wei Shayin pushed her around and around, along the maze-like corridor to find the underground elevator. After a long descent, she entered a vast space. Why use the word vast? Because this place is simply an artificial small world, with fragrant vegetation and gentle breeze. When you raise your head, the stars on the electronic dome, which is hundreds of meters high, are twinkling. It looks so realistic, as if you are in a real wilderness. This kind of place is usually built to prevent employees who work underground for a long time from claustrophobia, but it is rare to see something as generous as the Wajia fortification. Wei Shayin pushed her through the long grass and fireflies with difficulty, the wind blowing on her body, which made her feel a little cold. After walking for a long time, an electronic gate blocked their way. Wei Shayin stretched out her finger and put it on the door lock. After a while, she heard, "Gene matches, unlock electronic synthesized sound." However, another electronic synthesized voice came immediately, "Young Master Wei Shayin, your permissions have been adjusted. Only you are allowed to enter this door. Please do not bring others with you, otherwise, shoot without mercy." Wei Shayin. What happened? Which Sha Thousand Swordsman silently adjusted his authority? Xiaoling vaguely understood, and sighed softly, "It seems that your uncle had expected that I would come, and deliberately adjusted the authority to prevent you from taking me to see him. Why did Wei Lingnan do this? Haven't he always been very interested in her?" Wei Shayin frowned. He also felt that Xiaoling's explanation was very possible. You wait here, there is really no other way. He knows how powerful his base's defense system is. If he wants to force a breakthrough, Xiaoling can be cut into pieces by the photon cutting beams shot out from all directions in an instant. "I'll go in and find the little girl, uncle, convince him to see you." Xiaoling nodded and watched him walk in. However, after a long time, Wei Shayin didn't come out. The weather in the artificial small world changes, The starry sky gradually dims, sporadic snowflakes fall down, and soon it turns into heavy snow. Xiaoling sat in the wheelchair, looked around, and struggled to turn under a big tree to avoid the falling snowflakes. However, the snow became heavier and heavier, the branches made a snapping sound, and the road they came from gradually became shorter. Be invisible. Xiaoling shivered from the cold and hugged her body tightly. Do you want to go back? She looked at the closed electronic door and then at the way she came, thinking reluctantly. As long as she retreats to the elevator, she will be safe and can ask the staff to change into warm and dry clothes or even drink a cup of hot tea. However, Wei Lingnan would not be able to see him that way. She raised her head and looked at the falling snowflakes in the air, her thoughts swirling in her mind. Maybe Wei Lingnan was deliberately using this weather to force her back. Is her every move in this sophisticated underground castle under his surveillance? She's not sure. But no matter what, I don't want to back down like this. Her lips turned purple from the cold, and she struggled to shout in the air, Wei Lingnan. Don't forget that I am the phoenix of the Xia family. If you dare to freeze me to death, the Xia family will not let you go, she shouted. Several times, after a pause, there was only the whistling of the wind and snow in all directions, and other than that it was dead silent. She felt uneasy. Maybe Wei Lingnan really didn't see her there? The general monitoring room was empty. Several monsters that looked like wolves and dogs were roaring and biting each other. They struggled together. The force of the fighting broke several buttons. Among them, Xiaoling was there. Artificial space. In a row of buttons, the thermostat was randomly pulled to an extremely low position, and on the corresponding monitor screen was a snowflake, and under the specks of blood was a human corpse with its neck bitten off. Experimental subject number 21 ran out again. Soon, several people wearing full-body protective suits and holding firearms broke into the main control room. After a burst of shooting, several hybrid monsters fell to the ground helplessly. One of the people said, "You guys, put them back in the cage, record the experimental data, and then ask someone to clean the place and send a new monitor." "Yes," several other people wearing the same protective clothing responded. "Manager Liu, several monitors here have been damaged," someone said. "Would you like to send someone to check the situation in the corresponding area?" The leading man was impatient. "Who can get into this kind of ghost place? Experiment number 21 is very aggressive. Send them back to the laboratory as soon as possible to prevent them from escaping again. Everyone in the regular team will go. Don't worry about the surveillance side. When the new monitor arrives, it will be fine after repairing the monitor." A group of people agreed one after another and did what Manager Liu said. Xiaoling was under a big tree, and it was freezing cold. She tried to turn her wheelchair to move to a safer place, but the ice and snow made even her wheelchair stuck in the snow. No matter how hard she pushed, she couldn't push it. She stood up unsteadily, her vision blurry due to hypothermia, and she fell into the snow after taking a few steps. Lilei. She stretched out her hand with difficulty, as if trying to catch something, with only one thought in her mind: I can't die, I have to go find Wei Lingnan, to save Lilei. In a trance, not sure if it was an illusion, a tall and slender man walked towards her. The man was dressed in white, his clothes fluttering in the wind and snow, his eyebrows were stern and picturesque, and he bent down to pick her up. "Are you willing to die?" His voice was clear and cold. "Is it worth it just for the person who signed a master-servant contract with you?" End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 959. Chapter 959 Sanskrit Sound of Nature. Xiaoling reached out and grabbed his sleeve, her voice inaudible. "Brother, Don't. Xia Moyan frowned and carried her to a safe place, but she grabbed his sleeves harder. I don't want to go, don't carry me away, I want, save, Lilei. Xia Moyan's voice was filled with anger. If you die, how should you save him? Xiaoling looked pale and murmured, if he dies, I will die with him. Xia Emo remained silent and walked on the road with her in his arms. The metal door closed behind him, isolating the wind and snow in the sky into another world. He pressed the elevator button, and a beautiful electronic synthesized voice came, welcome, Mr. A50714, which floor do you want to go to? The ground floor, Xia Moyan said. Xiaoling struggled weakly, I won't leave, I want to wait for Wei Lingnan. Xia Moyan lowered his head and told her, Wei Lingnan is in seclusion recently, doing something very important. Even if the sky falls, he will ignore you. If you really want to save Lilei. He was silent for a long time, watching his sister struggle. It got worse and worse, and he vowed not to give up until he achieved his goal, so he said, I have a way. Xiaoling's struggle suddenly stopped and she looked at him in disbelief. Didn't you say there was nothing you could do? Because that method requires you to take a lot of risks. Xia Moyan didn't want his sister to be in danger, so he said there was no way to save Lilei, but her sister said that if Lilei died, she wouldn't live either. He believed she could do it. There is another level. Wei Lingnan is in seclusion, but who knows when he will come out? If his experiment still fails this time and he is unable to discover the secret of reincarnation and nirvana, he might really take action against Xiaoling. Who asked Xiaoling to come to her door? Xia Moyan would never allow such a thing to happen. He took Xiaoling back to the hospital for treatment and told her how to save Lilei. With her brother's help, Xiaoling worked harder than ever to maintain her health. 3 days later, she stood on the stage of the Fanyuan Stadium, the largest venue in the city. The stage is covered with a brand new sycamore wood floor, which is carved with complicated patterns in some unknown way, circle after circle. From a distance, it looks like a large array. Xiaoling was wearing a plain white dress, her long hair was loose, her feet were bare, and she didn't wear any accessories. She stood in the center of the stage like a sacrifice, holding the microphone, facing all the audience and the real-time broadcast of the camera lens, and said, everyone has watched the news and knows that my husband Lilei is still in a coma in the hospital. He didn't wake up and was not out of danger. In half a month, the hospital gave him 5 critical illness notices. I was really scared, afraid that he would just leave me. Her voice was choked with sobs, and she paused slightly to swallow back the cry. Thousands of spectators looked up at her in the audience, and the scene was completely silent, waiting for her next words. They all know that something happened to Lilei recently. Although they don't know how Lilei was injured like this, they all understand that as a newlywed wife, she must be very sad and sad now. They came here after seeing the promotion of the prayer concert in the media to support her and give her strength. The atmosphere under the stage was solemn, and you could hear a pin drop. Xiaoling continued, I'm not a doctor, and I can't help much by staying in the hospital. I can only pray to God to bless him and be safe. I believe there is a wonderful power in this world that can help us realize what we want. It seems an impossible wish, so I hold this concert to pray for him, and I sincerely ask everyone to pray for him. The strength of so many of us will surely move God. As she spoke, she bent deeply and bowed to the audience. Under the stage, many people were sighing. This concert is free of charge. The only entry requirement is to pray for Lilei. Through her diva appeal, the venue that could accommodate 100,000 people was packed with people, and many fans from other places were on their way. At this critical moment of life and death, countless fans and passers-by chose to help her. They all rolled their hands into trumpets and shouted to the stage, don't worry, Xiaoling, Lilei will be fine. That's right, if God sees you love him so much, he won't have the heart to let him leave you. He will definitely recover. We will all pray for you. The sounds come and go like waves. Xiaoling looked at the audience, she was so moved that she could not speak, and her eyes were slightly red. At this moment, she was extremely lucky that she was a big star and could gather so many people to pray for Lilei sincerely. My brother said that the more people in this prayer formation, the more effective it would be. With Lilei's injury, she could only give it a try by gathering her fans from all over the world. She said thank you to the audience, and then said to the camera lens, I also ask my friends who are watching the live broadcast in front of the TV and on the internet to also support me. Thank you for your prayers. I will always be grateful to you. She also bowed deeply to the camera. In front of the TV, many fans who could not go to the scene were moved. They made up their minds to pray for her and Lilei. She loved him so much, and he would be fine. On the open-air stage, under the starry sky, she raised the microphone and sang. The song she sang this time was different from any of her previous songs. It was a strange and indescribable melody, like a mysterious Sanskrit sound coming from distant time and space, or like an unknown bird singing gracefully. This is the song of the phoenix. Everyone was shocked and immersed in the beautiful chanting and could not recover for a long time. They originally thought that even if it was a blessing concert, they would use her classic songs from all over the years, but this time, the melody used was obviously a melody that no one had heard before. There are no rules to follow, but it is so wonderful that it is not like the human world. Oh my God, what is this? In front of the TV screen, a girl who was drinking water was so shocked that she didn't realize that the glass in her hand fell to the ground. Mom, Mom, come and listen. I have never listened such beautiful music. No, it's not beautiful, it's sacred. Sacred, solemn, beautiful. The wonderful Sanskrit singing flows like water under the starry sky, attracting countless people to be intoxicated. Xiaoling was dressed in white. She raised her head slightly and closed her eyes. The most shocking melody came out of her lips that were almost colorless. The night wind blew the hem of her clothes lightly, like a dream. Before going on stage, she asked her brother anxiously, "What should I sing?" Xiaomoyan said, "You don't have to ask what to sing, you will know it when you get on stage. You are the phoenix, and your soul carries the ancient memories of the phoenix, and the formations on the stage will help you and let you recall those memories. The long-lost Sanskrit sounds come from your soul. As long as you open your mouth to sing, you will naturally know how to sing." End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 960. Chapter 960, Stubborn Persistence. She was still worried, but she chose to trust her brother without reservation. Now, immersed in the night wind, she seemed to have forgotten who she was. The moving melody came one after another, following the desire in her heart to seek Lilei safe and sound, rising and falling like the tide, as sweet as the sound of nature. She didn't know how long she sang, or even what she sang. Scenes from her past with Lilei came to her mind. The clear sunshine in the forest when they first met, his smiling face as warm as the spring breeze, flew up in the storm. The figure rescuing her on the cliff, the amulet, the hand reaching out to her from the depths of the sea. Lilei. He has done so much for her. Now, it's her turn to save him. She is stupid and can't do anything well. The only thing she can do well is singing, so let her use this only way to get him to wake up. Do your best. Sing until your voice becomes hoarse. The texture of the sycamore wood floor rotates, and under the hazy and dreamlike lighting effect, it is like flowing vortices, faintly echoing the stars in the night sky. I don't know if it was an illusion, but as more and more people were moved and their desire to pray grew stronger, the texture of the sycamore wood became clearer and clearer, making the starry sky shine brightly. She sang so loud that she fainted on the stage. The stage was closed, and most of the audience did not leave, waiting for her to appear again. They were all informed that this blessing concert would last for a long time, and as long as Lilei didn't wake up, it would not end. During this period of time, Xiaoling met the necessary physiological needs such as eating and sleeping every day, and spent all other time on the stage, singing songs about blessings non-stop. Although, they are all worried about her health. But he was deeply moved by her love and volunteered to stay with her until the end. As the concert progressed, the news gradually spread, and more fans took the trouble to come to the scene. Even many passers-by were so moved that they voluntarily joined the prayer team. The 100,000-person stadium can no longer accommodate these people. A flood of people gathered outside the stadium, watching the concert with their mobile phones and small TV screens, while holding up slogans such as Lilei get well soon and Xiaoling, hold on. Brand. Even the traffic is jammed. The Li family and the Xia family communicated with the government and sealed off this block to free up more places for everyone to pray. Even Xia Moyan personally apologized to the citizens, saying that blocking the block was a last resort and that all affected citizens would be compensated. In addition, he also asked everyone to pray for Lilei. More and more citizens joined the prayer team. On the way to and from get off work and during lunch breaks at school, you can see men, women, and children everywhere listening to Xiaoling's live concert with various devices, chanting words, or praying silently with their heads down and eyes closed. Lilei still didn't wake up. He was lying quietly in the intensive care unit. The severe snake venom left him struggling on the line of life and death. Sometimes he had high fever, and sometimes he was as cold as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Every time the doctor went in for an examination, he would shake his head when he came out. "Doctor, please save my grandson at any cost," Mr. Li stopped the attending doctor who had just walked out of the ward and begged him. These days, he seems to have aged a lot overnight, like a real old man. He is no longer as energetic as before, but has no master. The attending doctor looked at him sympathetically, but had to say, "Mr. Li's condition has not improved at all. We have tried all possible methods. Whether he can wake up depends on God's will. Is there really no other way?" Mr. Li was almost desperate. The attending doctor looked back at the ward. Through the entire glass observation wall, he could see a small speaker inside. The speaker's green light flashed and it was playing Xiaoling's prayer concert. "Method. I can only pray that Miss Ling's method will work," the attending doctor said with a sigh, but he knew in his heart that unless a miracle happened, Lilei would definitely die this time. The snake venom attacks are becoming more and more severe, and the body's organs are getting weaker and weaker. If this continues, it will be a problem for Lilei to continue to save his life, let alone wake up. He whispered, "Old man, don't be too sad." After saying that, he walked past Mr. Li. Mr. Li slumped against the wall and slowly fell down on the bench beside the corridor. How could he not be sad when his grandson was like this? Xiaolei. He looked at his grandson in the critical ward through the glass wall. "How can you be so cruel? My old man is not dead yet, and you want to leave me first? Xiaolei, wake up quickly, please wake up soon, okay? As long as you wake up, I will agree to whatever you ask for." The old man's cloudy eyes had a sadness that was too thick to be resolved. On the stage, Xiaoling didn't know how many times she passed out. Each time, she would just take a short break before going on stage again. Ms. Xia was so distressed that she wiped tears from her eyes. Xia Moyan was also very worried. If her sister continued like this, could she really hold on until Lilei got better? The news from the hospital is not optimistic. This is also the reason why he first told everyone that there is no way to save Lilei. This method has a success rate of only 50% to save Lilei, but the damage to Xiaoling is huge. If she is not careful, she may even die. She had just recovered from a serious illness, how could she withstand such a high-intensity concert? But he couldn't stop her. She was determined to save people no matter the cost. The outcome could only be left to God. Xia Moyan could only pray in his heart, hoping that the Xia family had accumulated enough merit over the years to allow God to be more generous and let these poor couple go. Xia Ling was exhausted again and was helped off the stage to drink water and eat. Mrs. Xia felt distressed and fed the semi-liquid food with rich nutrition into her mouth, and said, "Xiao Ling, it's important to save Li Lei. You should also pay more attention to your body. If you collapse, he will blame himself very much. Yes. Little Xiaowai needs a mother too." Xiaoling was too weak to speak and just ate in silence. She didn't know how many days she had been singing continuously, and her voice had already become congested and hoarse. If it hadn't been for the medicine specially prepared by a professional doctor, her voice would have been broken. She didn't care what Mrs. Xia said. After finishing her meal, she turned around and staggered back to the stage. Mrs. Xia looked at her thin back and burst into tears. Suddenly, I heard someone calling, "Xiaoling." A low, gentle, masculine voice. Xiaoling turned a deaf ear and continued walking to the stage lightly like a ghost. The man put his hand on her shoulders and forcefully pulled her over to face him. He looked at her haggard appearance, frowned, and said, "You can't go on like this." End of this chapter.